Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the Ingram in Phoenix, Arizona. Today I'm going to do another video showing you guys some of the recent acquisitions, things that are going into my collection. And I'm going to start off with just an absolute banger of a record that I never thought I would actually own. I knew it existed, but it was so rare. I had, until this point, only seen one copy of it. And it just never dawned on me like this would ever even be a possibility of something that I can own. And that's this Elvis Presley record. Now, this is maybe the fifth copy of this record I own, so it's not a super rare record. But what is super rare about this record is the condition. Finding a copy of this record in tip-top condition is extremely rare. Now, when I was a kid, this was a grail. Like growing up in the early 90s, punk, metal, rare new wave, northern soul, that stuff didn't exist. I mean, it existed, but nobody cared. The grails growing up in the 90s as a record collector were Elvis records, Elvis records, Beatles records, Buddy Holly records, Ritchie Valens records. These were the records that brought in the biggest amount of money. Those were the creme de la creme. And this was a record that I thought back then growing up was unattainable. I got older. I got into collecting records. Elvis's popularity amongst collectors kind of went down. And I've obtained many copies over the year. But what I've never even just dreamed that I would be able to obtain is this copy. And that's because it's sealed. Now, you might say to me, Mike, you're full of it. They didn't seal records in the 50s. You're right. Manufacturers didn't seal records, but some department stores required records to be sealed. So they were actually purchased from distributors in, at the time, distributor shrink. So by today's standards, we consider those sealed records. So there's a little history with this record, and I'll tell it to you. And let me show it to you. I've seen one other copy of this record in my lifetime. It was actually in Las Vegas at Wax Trax, maybe about 15 years ago. And at the time, Rich, the owner, put a price on it that I thought was, I'm not gonna sell this price. It was $5,000. Now this was 15 years ago where almost no records went for $5,000. That was like an unheard of price. Now, $5,000, not really a big deal. There's a lot of records that go for that. So I seen that one copy there. Now this particular copy actually sold on eBay in 2007 for $1,000. Let me show you a better shot of it there. How do I know? Well, because it's a pretty unmistakable copy because there's actually a tear here in the shrink. See if you can take a look at that. Not only that, the way that the price tag sits and just the overall shrink, this exact copy sold in 2007 on eBay. The gentleman that bought it resold it maybe 3 or 4 years later on Heritage auctions. At that point in time, it sold for $2,500. Now, Heritage has a feature to where if you win something, other people can make you offers and you can either choose to accept or just ignore those offers. But it shows you what those offers were. Now, there was offers on this album up to $3,700, but the guy had never sold it. Something happened. He passed away. And it ended up on eBay again in a Elvis-centric record store, I believe in Memphis, for $2,500. Buy it now. And not buy it now, excuse me, $2,500 auction. And I put a bid in. I thought to myself, you know, wait till the last couple of seconds of the auction like you typically do on eBay because it's not an auction house. It's a timed lot house. Not a true auction because once you place a bid at the very end of the auction, there's no time allotted for somebody else to make a counter bid. So eBay's time lots. So gaming the system a little bit, waited till the last couple seconds, and nobody else bid. I was absolutely shocked. $2,500 is what I paid for it. I'm not a huge fan of sealed records, but Elvis is my all-time favorite artist. This is one of the most iconic LPs of all time. This is the record that kind of launched rock and roll. There was artists that had rock and roll going before Elvis, but they didn't make it mainstream Elvis. They weren't as influential as Elvis, and that's just the truth. John Lennon said before there was Elvis, there was nothing, or something to that effect. Elvis was and is the man. And for me growing up as a big Elvis fan, never thinking I would ever own this album, then to own multiple copies, and then to own one of only 2 copies that I know of in existence that are sealed, was a no-brainer. Now, unfortunately, the idiot that sold me this record packed this magnificent gem, this item that can probably never be replaced unless I can find that other copy that was at Wax Trax all those years ago, in a white cardboard mailer of death. When I saw this and I knew who it was from, I was traumatized. You couldn't imagine, it's bad enough when you buy a brand new Tone Poet and they mail it in that crappy white mailer of death. But for an item like this that I knew would never, ever be replaceable, I was just besides myself. Opened it up, possibly a little tiny corner push from that particular journey from Memphis to Phoenix, but no seam splits, and it arrived mostly intact. But an amazing piece. If vinyl grading ever gets, off the ground by a reputable company that I could get behind with knowledgeable graders that I can get behind, this is what I would do with that record. I know it's verboten to talk about vinyl grading, but I think it's here to stay, and I think it'll get improved, and that record will go for, to be graded. What an absolute killer dynamite piece. I'm so thrilled to have it. You might see that I'm in a stage where I've been auctioning off things on Whatnot, and I've been slimming down my record collection. But I'm still taking plenty of things home. It's just now, rather than taking 3 records home per every 1 record out, we're kind of doing it in reverse. I'm taking some stuff out, but I'm still bringing plenty of records home. And I'm super thrilled to have this. Absolutely phenomenal record. I'm thrilled. It's not a record I'll probably ever sell. It's just beyond words. To just think mentally where I've come as a collector, as a kid, growing up poor, never thinking I'd be able to even own that record, let alone maybe one of 2 sealed copies known in existence. Blows my mind just thinking about it. I get choked up. Okay, the next record is this Alanis Morissette album that just came out from Mobile Fidelity, supposed former Infatuation junkie. Now, when I heard this originally at the store, I was pretty blown away by it, and I thought it was pretty good. And I, from memory, thought to myself, the original can't sound this good. I really got to stop giving off-the-cuff takes on records I listen to at the store, because it's not the most optimal environment. Now, I will say this. I took it home, and I listened to my original, and my original's not too terribly good, but this isn't too terribly good either. Because this is just not a very good recorded album, really is what it boils down to. Now, does my original blow this away, or does this blow my original away? No, they both have their strong suits. I like the original in some respects better. I like this in some respects better. The long and short of it is it's just a mediocre sounding recording, especially considering the previous album, Jagged Little Pill, was significantly better sounding of a record. But this is the kind of record I love to see from a company like Mobile Fidelity. It's not a one-step. It's not a 45 RPM. It's not an $80, $90 super vinyl record. It's a standard 33 RPM of the album. It's a double, because that's a CD. It's a CD era record, so kind of about 60-ish minutes of music. Needs to go on 2 discs. So it's still $60, but it's a standard 33 RPM album. The original album was a 33 as well. I will say this. I think it's her second best record, and it's very close to the original. It's a toss-up, but this is in print. You can easily get it. An original is pretty difficult to get, and even more so difficult to find, like a minty fresh copy. And the original is never going to be pressed on the level of quality that this is on. I mean, the new Fidelity pressings are, I'm willing to go out and far as say that Fidelity right now, I think is probably the best pressing plant in the world. Their quality is, it was a little rocky in the beginning, but they have got it dialed in now to where I am seeing the quietest, the flattest, the most error damage-free records out of any other pressing company. They are on point, unbelievably good, lights out good. They're just making phenomenal, like 1980s JVC super vinyl, good quality records. Really, really good. So you're not going to get that with an original, but a cool record. If I didn't have an original, if I was on the other end of this video list, I'd have no problem picking that up. But it's not an audiophile record. You know what I mean? It's a good 70s alt-rock record, worth owning if you're a fan. Yeah. Okay. I picked this up randomly. One day I was on Whatnot before one of my auctions, and somebody new came on and they were just doing auctions. And they're like, yeah, I found some records at a yard sale and I'm just auctioning them off. There was like 7 people watching. And he pulled this out. And he's like, yeah, I got this. It's in pretty good shape. And then he like pops the record out of the sleeve. And it's a yellow promo. Verve promos were not white label promos. They were yellow label. And then I got it. And it's like, it's in good shape. You know, there's not really any marks on it. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. It wasn't super cheap because he was starting everything relatively high. But I was so thrilled when I got this. Bill Evans, A Simple Matter of Conviction. And it's just a beautiful yellow label promo. I just, you know, I've got a copy of this at the house. It's not as nice as this, and it's not a promo. So, yeah, it's going to be an even swap. I'm going to keep this nice, beautiful promo, and I am going to sell off my other copy. But even the cover, look, beautiful condition. So that's a record I brought home this week, or a couple weeks ago, I should say. About 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, I bought a collection from a lady who literally lived a block from the store. And her husband had worked for Fender. He worked, I think, in the photography department, but had been there for decades. He must have at some point knew somebody in the industry. His collection was okay for the most part, but what he had was a run of 1970s white label test pressings or white label promo pressings. They were essentially test pressings, but made to give out to DJs. He had about 15 of them. They were all kind of within that same exact manufacturer of date of like a few months. But one of the records I got from him is this Ramones white label test pressing. Look at this. What's beautiful about this particular record is he doodled on the cover. It's Leave Home, by the way. But what he did is he doodled on the cover, and I just thought the art was so fantastic. He, you know, the guy was a graphic designer of some kind, artist, graphic designer. But look at the fantastic job he did, and it's period doodling, you know what I mean? And then he doodled on the back. Now, this is actually where the original piece of tape would have resided. But so cool. Now, I got a bunch of these that I'm not showing you. Like, he had a pile of Cheech and Chong test pressings. That's something I'll probably auction off in the future. He had a Dead Boys test pressing, their first album. I might auction that off in the future, but I'm not going to auction off this Ramones. I'm going to keep this. And one of my all-time favorite bands of all time, he had one of their test pressings. That is the Talking Heads' Fear of Music. Unfortunately, we didn't get any fancy doodling on this particular record. Now, yeah, no doodle free. But he did put, kind of in an artsy way, the track listing on the label. But yeah, I've got a white label test pressing of Talking Heads' Fear of Music and the Ramones' Leave Home. I like records like this because I remember the person that I got them from. Now, in this case, it was the wife of the gentleman who passed away. But every time I pull one of these records off on my shelf and I look at it, and it's from a collection like this, I can kind of go back and I can remember the person I got it from or the family member I got it from, and it's kind of cool. But in this case, it's also something that I like and I would have kept either way. Another item I got not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago. Now, it's been a few months since I've done one of these videos, so this is kind of a culmination of kind of the best of the last couple months of stuff. But I got an original Japanese pressing of Herbie Hancock's Direct Step. This was a Japanese only release. Now, subsequently, I think this came out for Record Store Day even a couple of years ago. But I got an original Master Sound. Master Sound is kind of an audiophile record out of Japan. They did Wish You Were Here as a Master Sound. They did Thriller as a Master Sound. Some of them were digital, some of them were analog, but this is an original Japanese Master Sound of Direct Step. So cool. Huge Herbie Hancock fan. I have every Herbie Hancock record probably that he's ever done of him as the leader, including all these Japanese versions. And I had both of these in my collection, but they were both missing the Obi strip. So I also got a copy of Herbie Hancock Flood, which again, I'm just replacing the copy in my collection that was missing this Obi strip. If you guys collect Japanese records, you'll know that this Obi strip actually has about 50% of the overall value of the record. It is pretty crazy. The people that collect Japanese records, this is an absolute must. It increases the price exponentially. Some Obis, especially from like the late 60s, early 70s, the record could be 5 times the price with the Obi versus without the Obi. It's nuts. Another collection that I actually kept a few records from, I had a guy contact me, and he's from maybe Idaho or in that range, maybe Idaho, Minnesota, you know, that part of the country. I forget where he told me he was from, but he wasn't a record guy, but he knew a little bit about records, and he was a yard sailor. And he knew the right records to buy. He knew what was valuable, and he picked them up. He told me he never had a turntable, or he hasn't had a working turntable in decades, but some of the records that he found were unbelievable. I bought a couple of boxes of records from him. It was like 10 grand I gave him. But he picked up, like for instance, he would pick up classical records, but he only had the right classical records. So he had like Capitol Milsteins. That's the only Capitol records he had that were classical, were the Milsteins, which if those are the only things you want. He had like the creme de la creme of the Mercury Living Presence or the RCA Living Stereos. He had just rare private press jazz records like J.R. Montrose is In Action. But one of the things, and they were all in various conditions. So a lot of them were not records that I kept for myself. But one thing he had that was just in fantastic condition was this George Wallington Quintet. And a lot of productions did this as a prestige series title. They did 25 monos, 25 stereos. This is one of the mono copies. But I found he had an original, just in absolutely beautiful condition. First pressing, 50th Street label, beautiful condition, just absolute beautiful condition. A record that I did not have. Look at that. The record was fantastic. So yeah, I kept this as part of that collection. So again, just another piece of a collection that I bought. God, maybe this was 6 months ago now. It's been a while since I bought this. Probably shortly after I released the last one of these videos. Okay, about 5 years ago in the old store, somebody came in the store and said, "Do you buy classical records?" Like, it depends. Classical, we're very picky on. Very little classical is worth anything. Most classical, especially by the 70s and 80s, is worthless. There's not a lot of value. They're like, well, it's all by one artist. If you're interested, I'm like thinking to myself, well, I hope the artist is good. They brought the box in. I opened the box up, and the entire box was King Wah Chung records. Fantastic South Korean violinist, prodigy, phenomenal violinist. Her records are actually pretty desirable. But the whole box, there was like 4 of each record sealed. There was South Korean pressings. There was South Korean newspaper like holding the records in. And I thought to myself, what's the deal here? And like, oh, that's my aunt or there was a family member. I think it was their aunt. You know, it was kind of hard to, there was a little bit of an accent, so it was relatively hard to understand what she was telling me, but I bought the box. I think it was from her aunt, lived here in Phoenix. But what was cool about it is not only did I get a beautiful box of King Chao Wang records, King Wah Chung, it's like a tongue twister, King Wah Chung. Yeah. King Wah Chung records, but when I was going through this box, I didn't notice it at the time because we were just in the process of buying a big giant collection. It might have even been the George Benson collection. So this box got buried and I lost it for like 4 years. And I always wanted to get in that box and check it out. And I recently found the box a couple of months ago. And I got all the records, I priced them. But what I noticed in the box, there was a bunch of sealed records, but one out of every title was opened and she had autographed the back. Which was common. Artists didn't typically autograph in the 70s the front cover of their record. It was very common to autograph the back of the record. You know, you wouldn't want to damage the front cover artwork. So, I got Elgar. Let's see, Elgar Violin Concerto in B minor, autographed. One of these was not autographed, but I decided to keep it anyways because I kept one of all the records. Yeah, this is autographed. This says, Best Wishes, Happy New Year, King Wah Chung, December 1976. These early records of hers, especially the London pressings, are sonically fantastic. And this one was still sealed, but not autographed. But I kept it because I kept one of each of them. I had all of these, but I didn't have copies that were either autographed and or as nice as this. So I kept one of each of those. And it kind of remembers, you know, it gives me, when I see them, best part about vinyl is you get to kind of go back in time and you hold a physical item in your hand, you kind of transports you back to someplace, a time in your life or where you got the record, you know, that kind of thing. A record that kind of just blew me away, sonically fantastic, an audiophile label, or an audiophile record by not an audiophile label, and that is the new Etta James, The Second Time Around. This is done by Jackpot Records. Jackpot Records, by no sense of the imagination, is an audiophile label, for the most part, because they don't do audiophile covers. This is just a basic Blue Note Classic style cover, and they don't do the most whisper quiet vinyl. For instance, this is a splattered colored orange vinyl, but what is odd is they do source a lot of analog master tapes to make records from, and they go to the best mastering engineer mastering records today, Kevin Gray. So this is Etta James, The Second Time Around, all analog, cut from the original master tape by Kevin Gray. It's sonically fantastic, and it just blew me away how damn good this record is. And they're relatively inexpensive. I want to say this is a $20 or $25 record. Fantastic. So in the move, this is the last record I'm going to show you, but in the move, before I moved to the new location, we had a record store day. It was the very first time I ever live streamed. I think it was the first or maybe the second drop of 2020, where I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to do something new. I'm going to live stream record store day. Now I've done it every year since, and other places have started doing it. But at the time, I was the first person to do it. And I learned that you have to be very careful of music that is playing in the background because video will get taken down. And that's what happened to me with this particular record, this exact record. A lady came, she stood in line for this Dee Gees record. This is the Foo Fighters. The name of the album is Dee Gees, which is a spoof on the Bee Gees. And this is the Foo Fighters doing Bee Gees music. They do, well, I guess they're doing an Andy Gibb tune as well. You Should Be Dancing, Night Fever, Tragedy, shadow dancing, and More Than a Woman. This lady stood in line. She bought this record from me early in the morning. These were hot. Everybody was wanting them, even after record store day. And maybe today, this is still a couple $100 record. I think it's even been counterfeited. Anyway, she bought this record from me in the morning. And I'll never forget this. And if you were watching the live stream, maybe you remember this. She bought the record from me in the morning. She went home. She was thrilled to get it. She came back maybe 4 or 5 hours later, maybe went home, got a nap, came back and said, you know what? I want to listen to this record so damn bad, but I don't own a record player. This is the only record I own. I want a good setup. I want this to sound good. And I said, all right. So I took her back and I showed her at the time a really nice system. I think she spent around $5,000. It was a really nice pair of maybe, if I remember correctly, it was like a pair of Linton speakers, a mobile fidelity turntable, maybe a studio deck, and a nice integrated, it might have been a Cambridge amplifier. So it was a nice little package, good sounding stereo. And she's like, can I hear it? I want this, but do you mind if we open this up and I'll listen to it? I said, well, I got my copy over here. Let me just go grab it. I grabbed my copy and I put it on for like 10 seconds, not loud. It was on the other side of the store. There was so much going on. It was 40 feet from the microphone. I didn't think anything of it. Well, long story short, I think it was a 15-second clip, and the Foo Fighters had a takedown notice on the video like almost instantaneously, and the video is gone. And it wasn't something that I could edit the music out of because it was like a 12-hour video or 11-hour video. And if a video goes over a certain length of time, you can't even edit it on the platform anymore. So the video is gone, and it's because of this very specific record right here. Now, unfortunately, I've learned my lesson, and we listen to copyright-free classical music repetitively on record store days. So if you tune into one of my record store days, maybe you've wondered, hey, why have I heard, Beethoven's Seventh 42 times today? Well, that's why. Because I'm pulling from a very small list of copyright-free music that's safe for streaming. So my videos don't get taken down, because you never know. Sometimes they just monetize your video. Sometimes the copyright holder just takes them down. Another reason why I do license music when I actually do put videos on YouTube. But yeah, there you have it. This is kind of a small sampling of some of the records that I've taken home the last couple of months, including the almighty Elvis Presley, the iconic self-titled debut of Elvis. Phenomenal. Super thrilled. All right, guys. Check us out online at theingroove.com. Until next time.